G'day guys, GeIL20 here and welcome back to Oceania. So I've recently had a revelation about roads within City Skylines, and ever since I've just been a little bit obsessed with roads within City Skylines, and particularly in Dundee, where I think that well at least I thought that I had cracked the road layout. I thought, you know what, this is about as good as it gets. It's not. There's a couple of things that need to change, and I'm going to be changing those things over this episode. And probably over some other episodes, we'll see how we go. And you know, I think the overall problem with parts of the road layout in certain areas is that it's kind of boring. You know, as soon as you hit a grid, sort of a boring place. And I do want to change the grid a little bit. Just make some changes, just to upgrade it a little bit. And even the highway, I've got a highway that leads underneath the downtown, underneath the CBD, and I kind of think it's a bit of a waste of a road. You know, you can't see any of the fun things that that highway gets to do as it interacts with the rest of the city. So we're going to be poking that little highway up at some points through the city. But to kick things off, I do want to just change up a little bit of the grid around here because it is just far too rigid. Now, grids within cities, within Western cities, are quite rigid. Particularly in the US, they have crazy grids where they just span for forever. And I remember when I went to Manhattan a couple of years ago, finding places within Manhattan was just so easy because you just pretty much just take one road and then turn left or right and then you reach your destination. It was just such a crazy, easy place to get around. Whereas you look at a place like Sydney and the roads are pretty much all over the place. And so originally I was trying to meet somewhere in the middle so that we could have a lot of grids in places, and then also it changes depending on which suburb you hit. Now, the reason why I'm changing is because it's still somewhat uninteresting in areas. So what you've just saw me do was that I have just changed the grid ever so slightly in certain spots, so that rather than just going straight for 5 or 6 blocks, now it just changes a little bit, and I think the result makes for a more interesting layout. It does make it harder to zone, and it does make it harder to place down your buildings, but I think the overall idea of the city, and I think the overall places that we're going to be putting in are going to feel a little bit more unique and a little bit more interesting, and it's going to mark suburbs a lot better. I'll explain that a little bit more in this episode because I think it will be a bit more apparent when you look at the city from further away. But something else that I've just added in is I wanted to add this highway connection that diverted traffic from the main highway, and it's pretty much an overpass that then goes towards the city. Now, I didn't really need to create this, well, at least I didn't create this for traffic flow. I created this for aesthetics. And I've done that because this area in particular is going to be like a pretty rough neighborhood. There's going to be some warehouses, public housing. It's going to be a pretty low income neighborhood. And I thought that purely for something that I think will add to the scenery, I decided to put this overpass because I think we're going to be able to do some really interesting things in this area and just create a little bit more diversity rather than the roads just doing pretty much the same thing as it was doing in other areas. It's now changed quite a bit. And so this sort of comes back down to this greater idea that I have with this city is that you really need to make every block count. You know, you can't, well, at least you can't. I keep saying you can't do that. You can do whatever you want. But for me, I really want to make a city that, you know, I'm not wasting any space. There are really fun and interesting concepts within each block, and that each block should have its own vibe and ideas and represent a different aspect of a city. I don't really want to waste any area just by going, well, this is just another neighborhood and here's a grid. Like, we're going to be changing it up and making things a little interesting. And going back to the ideas of open world video games and how they try to condense a lot of ideas within a much smaller footprint, looking at the Los Santos map, which is meant to be a representation. It's meant to be Los Angeles. And look at Los Angeles, look at these roads. I mean, these roads are as straight as they get. The grid is so rigid. But then look at Los Santos. It's not like that at all. It's really all over the place. The roads, there are grids in areas, but then the road kind of just shoots off in a slightly different area. And it's not just the direction of the roads, but also the slope, like even the landscape. LA is very flat, but that's not the case in Los Santos. So you have to really think about the reasons why they've made those changes. It's purely because it creates for a more interesting and diverse city. I think if they were trying to condense Los Angeles within such a small footprint like they have done, but tried to keep true to the geography of the city and the road layouts, it would be quite boring. So that is the big source of inspiration for this build today, to get an idea of how to really condense those ideas within such a small footprint, which is something that I thought I did really well to begin with within Dundee, but there's definitely always going to be improvements and things I'm going to change. And you know, it's not just road layouts that are going to change. You can see that I've also just changed the direction of the train line, just slightly, because I had a better idea now of where stations are going to go. And you can see that I've actually just used the district tool to mark where I want those stations to go, just as a bit of an idea where I think they would fit realistically. And I've also changed some of these main roads. Was never really that happy where that main road was. It felt a little bit off. It just didn't seem like a main road would do what it was doing before. And even still, I've now just changed it just ever so slightly, and I'm making it so it's a little bit more windy, not just a straight old road. That seems to be the theme for today's episode, making my grid a little less grid. And look, you can also see some areas there are, there's many blocks of following the same grid, but you can also imagine that within that there are going to be areas where we'll probably demolish a whole block or a road or two, and we'll place down a school or a park or something like that. So there are disruptions within that grid, even though at the moment it probably looks a bit rigid in some areas still. But now we're just still continuing working on this main road. And the main struggle with these roads is trying to imagine, because I mean, this is a road that would have been one of the oldest roads within the city. This road would have been the road that connects up to the rest of Oceania, and then it's been upgraded and things have changed around it, and it leads directly within the city. Would have been the roads that went over the bridge, like that's where now the highway is. And then now the highway has completely changed the way that traffic flows. Now most people are probably taking the highway instead. So trying to figure out where that road goes is really important, because you want it to go directly towards the city, but then also take on a little journey throughout the city. So it's always tricky with those main roads, because you never know exactly how to make it look realistic, but then also travel along a nice long distance. So we'll be able to see that a little bit better in the end cinematics. At the moment, we are now working on this intersection. This is the intersection that goes goes over the overpass and then travels towards the city. And you can see I'm having just a slight little struggle with Node Controller. Such an amazing mod. Just download it. don't even think about it. Just download it. It's too damn good not to avoid. And I've also used intersection marking tool. Again, download it. it's amazing. And just making some really great looking off ramps in that spot. Something that I'll probably keep. At first I thought, I'll just create something a little small there, and we might change it at some stage. I'm not going to change that. I like where it is. I think we're definitely going to keep that. And here I'm just creating a really simple ramp, just another spot on the highway, because I figured there would be more than just one. To warrant building an elevated road quite like this, probably need a couple of spots where people can access this main road. But as you can see, this is really only for people trying to get back onto the highway. This one, like that intersection, doesn't at all allow people to get towards the city using that elevated road. And now I'm just checking out some of the vistas here, because another reason why we built that is because I wanted to make like a really cool little spot where you can be able to see traffic coming into the city. I mean, I'm just imagining already traffic flow, like people just taking that road, elevated road towards the city, just the city opens up. I think it's going to look really cool. So I was just checking out that view. But now it's time to start working on this highway under here. So this highway, originally I was just going to have it go directly towards the, pretty much bypass the CBD and go hit up the highway on the other side. But again, thinking about trying to create interesting and unique areas, this would just be an absolute waste of a highway. I think we can do some really fun things here. So I decided, we've got this park that sits pretty close to the CBD, and I thought that this might be a nice spot for the highway just to merge from the underground, just poke up a little bit. And I thought we could do some really fun stuff with maybe like a grass patch over the top so that it was just hiding part of the highway. This is something I noticed. We've got a couple of highways that do something similar within Sydney, and this goes underneath the botanical gardens, and it's just cool. Like, you know, sometimes you forget there's a highway that goes under here, and then you just see it's poke up a bit, and I thought, let's do something similar. Now, the key is to make it look nice. I don't really want to create a highway over here that really disrupts that parkland. You know, I want this park to be still a really nice green space, and the highway is something that's just there. You know, you might even blink and not notice it. That was the idea. So this is me connecting the off-ramp to the highway, and this road that's right here is actually like the perfect road to connect up to, because it's a main road that actually connected up to the other main road that stretches along here. I know I'm saying I'm giving really bad directions, but trust me, this all makes sense. But basically, you can see where they've demolished that road. You know, they've changed where it's at, and instead they've used that main road, being such a large one, you can still use it for where quite a lot of traffic's going to be flowing out with this highway. Does that make sense? Probably doesn't make any sense. I feel like I'm not making much sense in my descriptions. Just check out the cinematics at the end, alright? Because that just gives you a little bit of an idea of how I've been trying to change roads. You know, something that I don't usually do within this game. I tend to build my cities with the road layouts pretty much exactly how it is. Whereas Dundee, I have purposely built roads in places, and I've been demolishing different roads as I go, because that's how cities operate. You know, they upgrade roads, they demolish areas. I'm not going to go and demolish like places that I spent a long time building. And this is why I'm doing all this sort of stuff now. Just like thinking about those changes that would have been made. So I've just created this little sunken highway, and I've used some retaining walls along the side of it and some trees just to act as a bit of a noise barrier. And now I'm starting to place down this grass patch that I, you know, just wanted a bit of the highway to be covered up. And, you know, you think that this would be a nice, easy thing to do, but the real tricky part about this is that it's not a flat area. Like, this whole area is very hilly, and that was really annoying to work with, which, you know, I'm sure a lot of you guys have been watching for a while. I tend to praise cities that are built on crazy landscape, you know. I get off on it. I love it. And then I curse it. So yeah, that's kind of my thing, you know. I like to complain about these decisions that I make, but I think it all pays off because I think it looks much better this way. I think it looks better that it's not on a flat area. Even though there's a lot of footage, it's like 3 hours, I guess, that you're not seeing. You know, that whole grass area just suddenly happened. There's about 3 hours of work of me trying to make it all fit and work and, you know, happen the way it should. But yeah, this grass area. So what I'm imagining is that this was a big project where they created that green space. They probably created the highway. No, I reckon they built the highway and then they made this green space a few years later. And this park is this beautiful entrance to this theater or museum. I think we're going to call it a museum. Or maybe it's an art gallery. I don't know. You guys decide. I don't know what it's going to be. It's obviously a building from somewhere, probably somewhere stunning in Europe. But in my context, it's a museum, art gallery, or something. You guys decide what it is. But anyway, this green space, this walkway that heads towards it, just looks great. And it just so happened to work out that way. It wasn't really something I planned. And I figured because there's going to be a lot of people around here, place down a little cafe there. And what I did is I actually PO'd it so that it's not... So otherwise I was doing some weird stuff. And then I just placed a little shop in there too so that people are actually using it. It's a functional little spot. And like I said, it's pretty crazy landscape around here, so trying to cover up a couple of imperfections. just by placing down some park benches and some hedges too. That's why those hedges are there. It's because there's just something wasn't lining up. I'm also putting in some fences, otherwise it'd be kind of dangerous around this area, and some noise barriers too, some retaining walls underneath this ramp, and it's just looking kind of nice. I'm really happy with how this little area turned out. You're not going to see a lot of traffic for a little while because I think it's faster for people to travel along some of the other roads rather than go along this area. But I think that this will eventually be a pretty busy highway. You can also see that it's now crazy bright. I don't know what happened. I think I must have just started playing with some of the settings. It's not going to, well, it's probably going to stay like this for the rest of the episode, but next episode is not going to stay like this. Like I promised, this is way too bright. And now I'm starting to work on this park that I wanted to be one of the main parks within the CBD. This is, of course, if you're a Sydney-sider, you would recognize this as inspiration from Hyde Park within Sydney. This is a park, actually, I literally just came back home. I was just at this park. So here's a couple of shots that I was just taking while I was there. But Hyde Park in Sydney, it's a pretty old park. It's got some really big old trees, and I wanted to capture that. I wanted to capture the oldness of it. So we've got this pretty old retaining wall that stretches along some of this area here. It was a bit of a, I wasn't expecting to do this retaining wall, but again, because we have a pretty big slope, and I figured, it would be a bit strange for a park like this to be on such a crazy gradient. I figured I'd flatten it out a bit. So I am using a retaining wall, and I'm also using some grass surface just to cover up some of the imperfections. And you can see there's a little bit of blackness, and you can see that it's not perfect, but a lot of that gets covered up, particularly when I put in those big old trees. Got some really nice Padelmo trees that are just like big trunks. You can tell they're, ancient trees, and they just look great. They look great in this park. Within Hyde Park, there is an Anzac Memorial, and there just so happens to be the same memorial on the Steam Workshop by Robert, who is one of my all-time favorite asset creators. And it's just a great looking asset. It's one of his older ones, maybe even one of the oldest, and it still holds up. It's still a super nice asset, so I'm going to be placing that down. I actually did a live stream a couple of weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, on Anzac Day, and people were wondering if I was going to be doing anything for the Anzacs as like to honor them. But I had nothing, I didn't even think about doing. Of course I knew it was Anzac Day, but I didn't even think that would be a nice idea. So this is my contribution. This is something that I probably should have done on Anzac Day. I think that would have made a much more, I don't know, I think it would have been a nice idea, but yeah, instead this is the Anzac Memorial. It's a month late, but at least we got there in the end. And in terms of detailing, I'm keeping it fairly light around here. Green space within City Skylines is a good opportunity to save on FPS. That's how I see it. I know trees can suck up a little bit of FPS, but I think trees plus building is, that's far worse than having some green space and some trees. So I tend to try and go pretty light in terms of props and stuff like that within this area. I know I'm saying all that, but you can see I'm placing down a whole bunch of stuff. But I am placing down a lot of stuff that are quite low poly, and there is still a lot of green space as well that I think will also save on some of the FPS that, honestly, still pretty strong here. Like, I've got a lot of detail within the city, and I'm flying around it pretty nice, like nice and easy. I want to quickly mention what I just did. I just wanted to change some of the color of the buildings, some of the main buildings. We've got the church, and we've got the museum / art gallery, whatever it is. And I want to change the color a little bit because sandstone is a pretty big use. Like, we use sandstone quite a lot within Australian architecture, particularly like some of the older buildings. And I just changed the color of those buildings so they had a bit more of a sandstone look to them. I just wanted to mention that. I just thought it was a little touch that you might not have noticed. You might not have realized what I was doing. And to finish off this episode, I mean, I'm going to do a lot of stuff that I'm not going to show you. I think just stick around to the cinematics, which are like so close. Like, don't bail now. Okay, just stick around. They're just like around the corner. But I do a lot of filling outs in this area just to make everything look super nice, super detailed, and this city is starting to come together and it's just so damn exciting. In the next episode of Oceania, I'm going to try and pump out a little bit more of a smaller episode because I would like to also release a Marble Mountain episode. Da-da-da. If you're still listening, yes, that's right. Marble Mountain will return next week. But yeah, I'm going to try and do 2 episodes, and it's a little bit tricky doing that. So, a little smaller episode of Oceania, but 2 episodes. So yeah, get excited for that. And if you want to show your appreciation for 2 episode type of weeks, then you can head on over to my Patreon page. Great way to show your support, and just really helps me out to pump out episodes as much as I do. And there's some people over there that I'd like to give a shout outs to. TJ Reed, Adrian Mayers, Megalodon Firefighter, Matt Austin, Adam Johnson, Emil, Dominic Martin, and Ariane Banerjee. Thank you all so much for your support. It's very much appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one. Catch you later.